Imagine this. A blazing sunny afternoon, you know the kind, wraps the city in this sort of deceptive calm. You've just finished your last exam, maybe grabbed lunch with friends, and you're driving back feeling pretty relaxed, relieved. Suddenly there's this deafening burst, shatters the peace. You think, okay, rear tire's gone. But you look back, tire's fine. And then what follows is, well, way more terrifying. The sound gets louder, harsher, like bullets just pounding on metal. It's not gunfire, it's hail. Violent, unforgiving, coming down incredibly fast. Like the sky itself is just furious. You're trapped in your car, no shelter anywhere nearby, just watching helplessly as these like tennis ball-sized hailstones batter your windshield, cracking the windows, crushing everything outside. Now, this wasn't fiction for a lot of people in Pakistan recently. It was a terrifying reality. They faced these unprecedented hailstorms alongside heat waves back in April and May of 2025, caused widespread damage and tragically claimed 18 lives, injured nearly 100 people across Punjab.
So today we're doing a deep dive into how a generation, one already dealing with a lot of economic and political uncertainty, is grappling with these extreme weather events, and crucially, how they're turning that anxiety into some really powerful action.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at a whole stack of sources today. They really shed light on the deeply personal impact of the climate crisis, particularly for Gen Z. And we'll explore how their unique mix of, tech savviness, creativity, and just sheer determination is shaking things up in the climate space globally. We're talking digital activism, green startups, even influencing national policy. It's quite a range.
Right. Our mission here is really to unpack how this generation is moving from just scrolling through bad news, doom scrolling, to actually doing something. They're not just asking for a seat at the table anymore. They're kind of building their own table and inviting the world to pull up a chair and do better. You'll hear some, I think, surprising facts and hopefully get a real sense of what makes this movement so different and so impactful. So, okay, let's start with this idea of eco-anxiety. It sounds like for Gen Z, it's way more than just like being concerned.
Oh, absolutely. Much more. For Gen Z, climate change isn't some abstract, far-off problem. It's very personal. It's a growing psychological stress, rooted in seeing the environment decline around them. Our sources describe it as this real emotional burden. Think about constantly seeing bad news online, seeing resources depleted, and this concept called the planetary death rationale.
Planetary death rationale. What exactly is that?
It's this sort of overwhelming feeling that the planet is basically doomed, that it's heading for an irreversible collapse. And that weighs heavily on young people.
And there's actual data backing this feeling up. It's not just anecdotal.
No, not at all. There was a big survey in 2021 globally. Over 59% of young people reported feeling extremely worried about climate change. And that number's only projected to go up. It really forces them to ask, what kind of world are we actually going to inherit?
And we see the real-world effects of this playing out, like in that Pakistan example. They're facing this dual crisis, right? Intense heat waves and then these sudden, incredibly destructive storms.
Yeah, our source mentioned golf ball-sized hailstones right in Islamabad, damaging university areas, cars, buildings. They even declared a rain emergency in Islamabad and Rawalpindi. It's intense.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, Pakistan's geopolitical situation adds another layer of vulnerability. Being a lower riparian state, basically, downstream, relying on rivers from other countries, and then add in things like India suspending the Indus Waters Treaty amidst rising tensions, well, that amplifies the uncertainty immensely. This isn't just about the environment in isolation. It becomes existential. It hits agriculture, drinking water, the livelihoods of, over 60% of the population? Wow. So you can see why Gen Z in these places are asking some tough questions. Like, why isn't climate resilience built into how we plan our cities? Or why aren't early warning systems better funded? And why is climate education still, just an optional thing in schools and universities? It makes it feel incredibly personal for them.
Exactly. It's right there in their daily lives and their future prospects.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Our sources show this anxiety isn't freezing them. It's actually kind of fueling a movement.
That's a really key insight. What's fascinating is seeing eco-anxiety get reframed, not as a weakness, something paralyzing, but almost like a superpower, a motivator. This generation is genuinely turning fear into fuel. They're finding hope, a sense of control, even solace, by taking action.
And that shift from the doom scrolling to doing, you really see it in how they use social media.
Oh, definitely. They've basically turned platforms like TikTok and Instagram into these sustainability classrooms. but they're fun, they're fast, super informative. For Gen Z in India, for example, activism often starts with just a single swipe. They're digital natives, they get how to use these tools.
Can you give us some examples? Who are these voices?
Sure, so you've got people like Julia Tariello, that's at julia.tariello. She breaks down complex stuff like how young people can actually engage with the UN, makes it seem less intimidating. Then there's Alina Wood, at its The Garbage Queen. She tackles climate science, but often focuses on positive news, which is a refreshing change. Leah Thomas, at Green Girly, does amazing work highlighting the intersection of climate and social justice. Really important connections there. And in India, you have Lasapriya Kangujam. She's known as India's youngest climate warrior, incredibly captivating. Disha Ravi co-founded Fridays for Future India, and Vani Murthy at Warm Rani on Instagram. She makes things like composting seem really relatable and doable through her reels. Their phones are literally loudspeakers. They're driving this environmental justice movement with hashtags, petitions, video campaigns, stuff designed to cut through all the noise.
But it's not just online clicks and views, right?
Yeah.
When that's not enough, they actually mobilize.
Yeah.
Physically.
That's spot on. They hit the streets. For over a decade now, really, Gen Z has been at the forefront of climate protests. Fridays for Futures is probably the most famous example globally, started by Greta Thunberg when she was just 15 back in 2018. That really showed the power of youth-led global action.
And we've seen really powerful examples locally, too, like in India you mentioned.
Absolutely. The Delhi tree protests, they successfully stopped over 16,000 trees from being cut down. That's huge. The Save Mallam campaign in Goa protected a national park from some really invasive infrastructure projects. In Mumbai, the RE Forest movement actually forced a major metro project to change its location. And even something like the EIA 2020 online protests, that's the Environmental Impact Assessment, Indian youth organized and essentially bombarded the Environment Ministry. 2 million emails.
2 million, wow.
Yeah, it shows that these actions, they aren't just symbolic gestures, they lead to real outcomes. Halted projects, more environmental scrutiny, way more civic engagement. It highlights the power of showing up physically, often organized digitally.
What really stands out to you about that physical presence element?
I think it's the irrefutable statement it makes. You know, you can ignore an email, maybe, but you can't ignore thousands of people demanding change right outside your window. It creates undeniable pressure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's clear they're not just protesting against things. Gen Z is also actively building solutions, kind of redefining sustainable living.
Exactly. They're really stepping up as architects of the solution, you could say, builders of the future. They're deeply concerned about climate impact, obviously, but they're channeling that into solving problems, often by integrating profit with meaning. It's not just charity, it's business.
Okay, so what are some actual examples of these green ventures we're seeing?
Well, take Vinted. It's a secondhand clothing retailer. In France, over a third of its users are under 30, and now it's the largest clothing retailer in the entire country.
The largest, based on secondhand.
Yep. Completely normalizing circular fashion. Then there's Misfits Market, founded by Api Ramesh when he was 26. They take imperfect produce stuff stores might reject and sell it, tackling food waste head on. There's also Force of Nature, a nonprofit led by Gen Z. They focus specifically on helping young people turn climate anxiety into agency. They have over 1,000 programs running in more than 50 countries.
That's impressive reach.
It is. And in India, you see ventures like Brown Living, focused on zero-waste products. Vrajbhumi uses textile scraps to create fashion. Junket India is tackling e-waste recycling. Gen Z is actively reshaping markets just by being ethical consumers and entrepreneurs. They're proving sustainability isn't just a buzzword, it's a viable, often profitable business model.
And all this momentum, it's also pushing its way into policy discussions and even shaping career paths.
That's a really significant shift. Gen Z is getting savvy about making policy actually work for people. Look at the Pacific Climate Warriors. They're led by Indigenous and Pacific youth. They've been crucial in pushing forward the conversation around the Loss and Damage Fund at the big UN climate conferences, COP27 and COP28.
That's a huge international stage.
Absolutely. And in the U.S., you have groups like the Sunrise Movement really pushing for ambitious policies like the Green New Deal. They're not afraid to be bold.
And it's filtering down into individual choices, too, like what they study or where they work.
Definitely. A recent survey by Handshake found Gen Z wants impact, not just a paycheck. They actively seek out companies aligned with ESG values. That's environmental, social, and governance. We're seeing a big jump in students choosing green majors, environmental science, sustainability studies, climate policy. That's becoming a mainstream career path. And even things like remote work. For many, it's not just about flexibility, it's a conscious choice to reduce their carbon footprint.
So how does this focus on purpose-driven careers reflect a new kind of environmental leadership?
I think it shows leadership that's integrated, not separate. It's about building environmental and social good into the system, into your job, into the economy, rather than seeing it as something extra or optional. It's fundamental.
And our sources also picked up on another fascinating angle here, the power of art and storytelling.
Yeah, this is really important. Climate communication, let's be honest, can be pretty dry sometimes or just terrifying. It needs a rebrand, and Gen Z is all over it. They're crafting new narratives using music, poetry, photography stories that resonate with hope, justice, and a call to action, not just despair.
Any specific examples that stood out?
Isisa Siddiqa comes to mind. She's a poet and activist. She blends performance and protest incredibly powerfully. Her poem, So Much About Your Sustainability and My People Are Dying, went viral because it just cut through all the jargon. It's raw, unfiltered. Then there's Aditi Mayer. She uses photojournalism to explore the links between fashion, colonialism, and environmental racism. She gives a platform to voices that are often excluded from the mainstream climate conversation, making it much more personal and intersectional.
So, okay, pulling this all together, what does it mean for the future of climate action? The sources seem pretty clear. Gen Z is firmly in the driver's seat, but it's not all smooth sailing, is it? There are challenges.
Definitely not smooth sailing. While their energy and commitment are just undeniable, many young advocates are already facing burnout, real emotional fatigue, and disillusionment too, especially when they bump up against generational divides, different priorities, feeling like they're not being heard in decision-making spaces. What they really need is sustained support, not just applause when they organize a big protest, but actual long-term backing.
Right. So the onus isn't just on Gen Z to fix everything. This needs collective action support from everyone else.
Absolutely. If we look at the bigger picture connection here, real impact demands collaboration across all sectors. It just has to happen. Educators need to weave climate literacy right into the curriculum, make it standard. Policymakers have to create genuinely youth-inclusive spaces, bring young people in as equal partners, not just tokens. Their insights are valuable. And businesses, they need strategies for environmental and social equity that are real, that go way beyond just looking good on paper, beyond lip service.
So for you listening right now, thinking about all this, how can you get involved? How can you be part of this disruption?
Well, our sources have some suggestions. Start simple. Share climate content that actually resonates with you, something that feels hopeful or action-oriented. Start conversations at school, at work, around the dinner table. Help push beyond just the doom and gloom towards what can actually be done. Think local, too. Can you join a project? Or maybe even start one in your own community. Make your voice count in the official channels, sign petitions, write to your politicians, participate in surveys when you see them. Or maybe create something yourself. Art, a podcast, a film. Never underestimate how powerful storytelling can be in shifting perspectives and driving change.
So we've taken a pretty deep dive today into how Gen Z is fundamentally transforming climate anxiety from this potentially paralyzing feeling into a really powerful engine for change. We've seen it in their personal experiences with extreme weather, how they mobilize online and on the streets, how they're launching green businesses, and even how they're reshaping careers. It's multifaceted and it feels really urgent.
Yeah, their engagement covers the whole spectrum, doesn't it? From protest right through to policy, from innovation to these purpose-driven careers. They're pushing for impact at absolutely every level. They're refusing to be just victims of the climate crisis. They're actively positioning themselves as, architects of the solution.
And honestly, with Gen Z really taking the wheel like this, the future of climate activism feels brighter, more dynamic.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, listening. If Gen Z's core approach is becoming sustainability isn't a choice, it's just the way we do everything, how does that mindset challenge your own ideas? How does it challenge your understanding of what impactful action really looks like? And maybe what leadership needs to be in this climate-threatened world we're all navigating? Something to think about.